Pre-Camino jitters. That's what we're talking about this week. We all get them. And this week I've had some questions in from Sarah in Sydney. And I'm going to answer those questions because it's kind of around the topic of pre-Camino jitters, which we all get. Coming right up. So pre-Camino jitters, I think most of us get those. I still do. Every time I'm planning a Camino, particularly if it's a new route. It's the unexpected, the unknown, that's all part of the excitement for me. But let me read Sarah's question, because I think some of the things that are going through Sarah's head are probably quite common. So I thought it would be a really good topic to talk about this week, because the answers to Sarah's question might help others. And of course, do feel free to jump in and offer your own advice as well. So here's the question. My name is Sarah from Sydney, and I walked from Sarria to Santiago in May. So Sarah's already walked a Camino. I took my time and had someone take my bag to the next hotel. I'm 72 and prefer my own room and a bathroom. Oh, I get that. I feel I should have done the whole walk from Saint-Jean, but wasn't confident I would manage it. I think that's common. I found the uphill absolutely awful. On level ground, it was great. I also didn't get that wonderful camaraderie that you talk about. Maybe that only comes when staying in albergues. No, not necessarily. I watched all your videos before leaving, which gave me so much inspiration. I was so looking forward to it. I was hoping to have an epiphany of sorts, maybe some kind of answers or improvements for myself. I'm reasonably fit, go to the gym 3 times a week. Well done. But not a big walker. I feel I want to go back, and I'm not sure why. Do you have any suggestions for me? I do have some suggestions. So let's get into that, because I think those questions are very common, particularly after a first Camino. You maybe didn't get quite what you wanted out of it, which can be one of the challenges, expectations, and you're wondering, if I go back, will it be better? Will I get more out of it? So let's kind of break down Sarah's question and we'll go through it. First of all, Sarah, I would say it's about managing expectations. And if you're thinking of another Camino, so you've walked from Sarria to Santiago, you didn't like the hills. I'm trying to remember where the hills are. I hate to say this, Sarah, but the hills on that section from Sarria to Santiago are not that significant, as I recall. There's a bit coming out of Sarria. There's certainly one coming out of Portamarin. There's a steep down into Portamarin. There's a bit of a hill coming up onto that hill before Santiago, but on a lot of the other routes there's going to be much bigger and longer hills. So let's talk about managing expectations to begin with. How far should you be walking? Is the social element is obviously quite important to you. You don't feel comfortable carrying a pack, that's fine. What I would say is this is going to limit the routes that you're going to be walking. So let's remind ourselves the Camino is not just the Camino Frances. The Camino Frances is the most popular one. It's kind of the OG. It's getting pretty busy these days. I mean, the positive side of the Camino Frances is that it's got great infrastructure. There's lots of places to eat, lots of places to stay, lots of fellow pilgrims to buddy up with. But it can get a little bit busy, and that in itself can cause some people a bit of stress with booking accommodation and things like that. So I would say, firstly, Sarah, think about what you really want to get out of this next Camino. Walking from Saint-Jean is not the be-all and end-all. You know, it's not a historical sort of traditional starting point. It's a popular starting point. I think about 14% of people walking the Frances start there. But there's no sort of historical significance about it. The Spanish, if they're walking a longer route, tend to start in Roncesvalles. A lot of people start in Pamplona. You can start wherever you like. So I think the first thing I would be saying to you is, what kind of distance do you feel comfortable walking? So you've walked 115 from Sarria. That's great. You've got that experience. You know a bit about what it's like. Do you want to do double that, 3 times that, 4 times that? And I've said this a few times on the channel. To me, it's not about the distance. It's about days on the trail. I don't walk long distances every day. I don't walk particularly fast, but I enjoy the journey. I walk it fairly slowly. But I find I need at least about 10 days on the trail to really enjoy it. this sort of process speeds up the more you walk it, I think. But I found on my first one, and so did Pat, that it takes about 7 days just to get into the swing of it. So Pat's first Camino, for example, was from Sarria just before, and she was really getting into it on the final day, and kind of went, oh, you know, she'd got over the physicality of it. She was used to the walking. She'd got over the sort of emotional bit. She was really starting to chill out and enjoy it. And I think for a lot of people, you know, that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days, particularly for a first Camino, is the time it takes to kind of bed into the whole process, get your body used to it, and so on. So if you feel up to it, I'd be saying try to walk for 20 days maybe. And how does that translate to distance? You know, are you up for walking 20 k's a day? So there you go. You might be able to do 400 k's or thereabouts. There's lots of planning videos on the channel. I'll make sure we've got some links down below to help you in that planning stage of thinking, if I walk for X days and this distance, you know, where are the places I could start with? If you are not really up to carrying a pack, and that's fine, that's going to limit your options a bit. So pack transport is limited to the most popular routes. So the Frances, the Portuguese. I'm pretty sure I haven't walked the English thing. I'm sure the English has got it. Fistera. Not sure if the Norte has it, but the more remote routes that are not as popular tend not to have pack transport. So not that you want to walk 1,000 k's, but the Via de la Plata, for example, doesn't have pack transport, although it does in the later stages along the Camino Sanabres. So if you want to have pack transport, I'll maybe put a comment down below which says that these are the Caminos that have luggage transport. And it's the traditional pack transport companies like Hacotrans and those sort of guys, but it's also the Correos, the Spanish Post Office, provides very good pack transport service. So that's going to point, I'm not going to say limit you, it's going to point you towards certain routes, the more popular ones, and it sounds like you want to have, you know, that social experience, so you get that too. The Frances would definitely be worth walking again. So you've walked a bit from Sarria, you could start further back. By all means, anyone else who's walked the Camino Frances, you know, comment down below about which sections you think might be really good for, say, a 20-day Camino. It's so hard to pick. I mean, all of it is so good. I'm assuming at this point that you want to finish in Santiago. So, you know, I generally like to finish in Santiago. It gives me a sort of sense of completion. And so however many days I've got or distance, I work back from Santiago. If you're not really that bothered about ending in Santiago, well, you could start in Saint Jean, walk for however many days and head home. Come back another time to finish it. So lots of different options on routes. And you know, just to stress again, to go from walking from Sarria straight to walking from Saint Jean, one, don't feel it's necessary, you know, don't feel that that's the real Camino or something. It's not, you know, you can start from wherever you like. It's just a popular start point. I was going to say it's not really necessary. Pat did it though. She walked about 150 k's on her first one and then walked from Saint Jean on the second one. She found it a bit of a struggle, I have to say, 800 k's. Fitness was the other bit. Now, Sarah, you actually sound quite fit. You go to the gym 3 days a week? I wouldn't know what the inside of a gym looks like. I'm terribly unfit, and I'm also overweight. So it sounds like your general fitness is pretty good, but you said that you struggle on the hills. Yes, the hills can be a challenge. And if you thought the hills from Sarria to Santiago were a challenge, they're going to be a bigger challenge on some of the other routes. What I would suggest, and I'll make sure there's a link down below, is have a look at the Gronza website, which I love to use for planning. And you can look at the different sections of the routes, and below the little map bit there's a plus symbol, and if you hit that plus symbol you see the route profile. You're going to make, I should have actually looked at the Sarria to Santiago profile again, just to see where those hills are that you're talking about. But on a lot of the other routes, and certainly further back on the Camino Frances, there are some quite hilly sections. There's some flat sections too. So maybe that's an option for you. Pick a flat section. Again, do you want to finish in Santiago? But let's come back to the fitness. It sounds like your general fitness is okay. Walking fitness is a little bit different though. You kind of have to build up to it, and it's a question of building stamina. So again, don't necessarily take me as an example, because I don't really train much prior to a Camino. I focus on losing weight because I always have a weight problem. So getting my weight down is my priority. And then I start off slow on the Camino. So this could work for you as well if you're worried about the hills. So I've mentioned this a few times, like day one I might walk 10 Ks and then 12 and then 14. I'm certainly doing that next time with Pat, because Pat's like me, she doesn't like to train much. So we kind of just start out slow and build up and build up and build up. That's one way of doing it. Most sensible people do a little bit of training, and the best training for walking is walking, not necessarily going to the gym. So you know, it's if you're practicing for a sport or something like that, very often the best training is just to play the sport. So think about that for walking, although a word of caution, don't overdo it. I did on my first one, and I caused myself injuries by overtraining, walking around the local area, lots of road walking, and I gave myself Achilles tendonitis before my first one, which I walked with all the way, which wasn't a lot of fun. But walking, yeah, soft surfaces, good footwear, build up your stamina for walking. For the hills, yes, now there's a few ways you can train for hills. If you go to the gym, you could use a treadmill on an incline. One of the things I like to do when I do train and training for hills is multi-story car park stairs. Not sure you might feel that the stairwells in multi-story car parks are a bit spooky, but you know, find long flights of stairs, maybe in a shopping centre or in a car park or something like that, and just go up and down, up and down. And you know what I'll sometimes do, I mean, I do a little bit of training in the weeks before, but you know, I might walk down to the shopping centre and I'll go up and down all the stairs in the car park, and then I'll do a bit of shopping, and then I'll go up and down all the stairs in the car park. And yes, my legs hurt. It does hurt, but that's training, you know, and every time it gets a little bit easier. Just to kind of put that into context, on my last walk, I did walk a Camino that was fairly flat, the Via de la Plata. There was a couple of hills on it, but nothing significant, until after about 4 weeks, I got to the Camino Invierno, which was really hilly, like, you know, 500 meters up, 500 down. It was like the first day of the Frances almost every day. But I just glided up the hills and down the hills. Why? Because I'd been walking for 4 weeks already. My legs were stronger, and it really wasn't a problem for me. So I suppose in that way, you know, what I'm saying is, if you're doing a little bit of training, and particularly hill training, you'll find those hills a lot easier. Nobody finds them easy, you know, nothing's easy about it, but building up a little bit of leg strength and stamina will help. What about the Camaraderie? That's a tricky one, and I have got some videos on it, so I'll try and remember to put one down in the link below. What it's like walking alone, and what's it like with a Camino family, and all the rest of it. Without sort of spending too long on it, let me just give you a few pointers. I'll go against the grain here. I don't think necessarily that staying in albergues helps you meet people. I was late to the party with albergues, and really only stayed in shared accommodation on my last Camino, because we're talking about getting the jitters and fears. I had this irrational fear, I think, of staying in albergues. I didn't want to be in this room with lots of other people, and I don't know what was going on subconsciously in the back of my mind, but I kind of avoided it and made excuses about, you know, I'm a snorer, and I found I'm actually not much of a snorer. But I did enjoy the albergue experience. So I totally get, you know, wanting to have private rooms. Don't just assume, though, that staying in albergues means that you're going to meet lots of people. I meet lots of people when I stay in private accommodation. And I think it comes down to the individual a bit, how open you are to starting conversations. So on my first Camino, for example, that I walked alone, I met loads of people, Gee, I'm kind of one of these introverted extroverts or something. I'm not quite sure. I'm very bad in the sort of big cocktail party type atmosphere with lots of people chatting and things like that. I can't handle big parties very well. But I'm okay chatting to people, you know, one-on-one, twos, threes, small groups and things like that. And I kind of got into a bit of a Camino family on my first Camino. On day one, which very often happens, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But because I was injured and walking slow, after a couple of weeks they all kind of went ahead of me, and I was kind of on my own again. And then I kind of fell in with some other people, and eventually they went on ahead because I was too slow. So I was kind of in and out of these loose Camino families. Some people love that sort of Camino family environment where, you know, very often they'll meet people on the very first day and they will just stick with them, walk with them every day, stay in the same places all the way to Santiago. I've never done that, and I think I would find that a little bit kind of restrictive. Again, you see, it comes down to the individual. I love to walk on my own. I just want to hear the bees and the birds and talk to the cows, and I don't want to chit-chat with people when I'm walking, but I do like the social aspect of a Camino in the evenings. And so I'm coming back around to why I don't find albergues are necessarily the be-all and end-all for socialising. So when you will have seen this in your walk from Sarria. When you come into a village, there's always like a pilgrim central. There'll be those plastic garden chairs out there and umbrellas and pilgrims sitting around all over the place. So what I very often would do, so I'm walking on my own, if there was someone else on their own, maybe just having a coffee or something, you know, without being intrusive, and you know, I might just be walking past with my coffee and say, "Oh, you mind if I join you?" And very often they go, "Yeah, sure." You know, don't be offended. They might say, "I'm just waiting for my friends," you know. But very often I've sat with somebody and then we have a chit chat and where are you from and all that kind of stuff, and where are you eating? Oh, we're eating here. Oh, should we have dinner together? You know, and friendships can build that way. I'll very often meet people on the path. So whilst I'm not walking with somebody, you know, if I'm passing somebody, I'll say hello. And, you know, again, you know, we've all got social skills to a degree, and we can understand body language to a degree, and you'll get a sense of whether somebody wants to have a chat or not. If you're walking on your own, other people on their own are probably going to be more open to you know, having conversations, joining you for a meal and things like that. That's kind of what I've found. So the downside of the Camino families is that if you're not in one, it can feel very isolating. So, you know, what's that quote? Never as lonely as in a crowd or something. I've certainly felt that at times in actually really busy albergues where there's been, you know, 2 or 3 big Camino families, and you're sat in the dining room and I'm sat in the corner eating dinner, like, I think I'll just eat this and go to bed. You know, that's my fault. I realise that. But, you know, when there's sort of close-knit groups, it can feel really awkward to sort of break into those groups and make conversation and so on. So I don't necessarily think that albergues are the solution. Camino families, a lot of people enjoy them, but they can seem like a little bit exclusive. And what tends to happen is that, for example, when people are walking from Saint-Jean, they'll meet people on the first day. They'll, you know, very often, I mean, not everyone does this, of course, but a lot of people will meet people on day one, they'll end up walking with them, and, you know, by 2 or 3 days, there's this little family group has formed, and their social life can very often be, you know, around that group, and others kind of drift in and out. That's kind of what I've found in the past. You know, I'll drift in, drift out. But it can, for people walking on their own, seem like a little bit of a barrier trying to break in. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, if you see other people walking on their own, I would always strike up conversations with them, because they might be just in the same boat. Very often they will be, and they'll be looking forward to having a chat with someone and maybe finding it a bit awkward to get a conversation started and things like that. So I've walked on that very first Camino, having said that, you know, I was in and out of a couple of Camino families, I also walked with some individuals, one particularly for about a week, and, you know, we built up a great friendship. Just someone walking on their own, I was walking on their own. Literally, we were walking up towards the Alto Perdón, and this person had stopped because they had blisters, and I stopped to take some photos, and we had a chat, and we were both walking slow, and yeah, we ended up walking together for about a week. And then, you know, our pace differed, and it didn't quite work out. But, you know, I've walked with other individuals on their own for hours, for days, with couples. So it's not something that you can kind of plan for, it just happens. But what I would say is be open to it, you know, be friendly, say hi, you know, join others for a coffee or on their own, things like that. It takes a little bit of effort, I suppose, and if you're particularly introverted, it can be a challenge. So sorry, that was a lot about camaraderie. Distance. So the distance we talked about, I said maybe 20 days. Are you flexible about that? Do you have to end in Santiago? Maybe you could do a shorter one, like a 10-day Camino into Santiago, and then if you feel like doing more, head out on a bus or a train and do another one. You know, you're coming from Sydney, Australia, so I understand that, you know, the travel is a long time getting there. We're looking at our flights for our next one, and, you know, it's the expense. So maybe allocate yourself a block of time, and you don't have to walk, you know, a 30 or 40-day Camino. Maybe commit to 20 days, see how you're going. If the 20 days was enough, go and sit on a beach, or, you know, go and visit Paris or something else. But if by that stage you're really into it, well, you could, I'm going to head off to A Coruña or something, and I'm going to walk down the Ingles. So it's great, you know, if you have that sort of flexibility, but you don't necessarily have to commit to a long one. You could do a shorter one and then another one if you wanted to. So that's hopefully answers some of your questions, Sarah. What I would say is that I think all of us get the jitters a little bit. And there's a wonderful acronym, because I think what can happen is that we allow some, and I'm going to be blunt, I'm going to call it fear. We allow some of these fears to build up in our minds, and I suppose I had this irrational fear of staying in albergues for many years. But there's a lovely acronym for fear, and I had to go and look it up because I'd forgotten it, but it was false evidence appearing real. We can psych ourselves up. You know, I had psyched myself up to the point where, you know, I'm not going to enjoy albergues. No, I don't want to be, you know, in this dormitory. I'm not sort of back at school, you know, and I might snore and people are going to complain. And I kind of just convinced myself that it wasn't going to work. And then when I tried it, it's actually fine. Some of the best sleeps I've had were in albergues, and some of the worst night's sleep I've had were in very fancy hotels. So, you know, a private room and bathroom doesn't necessarily guarantee you great sleep. So what I would say to you, Sarah, is sometimes we have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. Sometimes some of the most rewarding things we do in our lives, I think, are things that challenged us a bit, made us a little bit uncomfortable. And, you know, you mentioned that you found it quite hard walking from Sarria to Santiago with the hills. Walking a Camino is not a walk in the park. And certainly walking from Saint-Jean is not a walk in the park, day after day after day, and all sorts of terrain. But it's not walking to the North Pole either. And with a little bit of preparation, a little bit of fitness training, most people don't have a problem with it. Are you going to get sore feet? Yeah. Are you going to get sore muscles? Yeah. Are you going to get the odd blister? You might. It's kind of part of the territory. But I think if we allow these things to become barriers and stop us having a go, we can miss out a lot. So I know it's easy to say that, and we all have different levels of, I suppose, resilience for challenge and adventure and things like that. But if I look back on my own life at some of the things that I got a little bit pushed into doing, I'm not going to digress with stories because this is about answering your questions, but I got over my life pushed into doing, 3 or 4 things that no one in their right mind would ever do. And when I actually had a go at doing them, I thought it was incredible. So if you are drawn to walk the Camino again, and if you're drawn to walk a longer one, go for it. And I think the key is around expectations. If you go with very few expectations, you're not going to be disappointed. So, whether that be around the types of accommodation, or, I don't want to walk up steep hills, or, I'm going to get, I'm going to be unhappy if I don't sort of have a good social life along the Camino. Put all that aside and don't have any expectations, and just be open to whatever's going to happen, and magical things do happen. And you will make friendships with the most unlikely people. We're all very good at judging, aren't we? And on my very first Camino, I learned that lesson so many times, that, had I met this person in the street, they're not the type of person that I would naturally have gravitated towards and had a conversation with. But you meet so many incredible people from all walks of life and cultures and countries. And I've had some fantastic friendships on the Camino, as I'm sure most people watching this have, with people that you would never meet in your day-to-day life. So I suppose my last sort of message to you would be, set yourself some goals and prepare. So, we talked about distances and potential routes and things like that. If you're worried about fitness and walking up the hills, pick a date, pick a Camino, start working towards that date. And one of the things you might be working on is getting better at walking up hills. So find those stairs without overdoing it, get into some training so that you find walking up long flights of stairs actually not a problem. Or walking up hills, maybe you have hills. Oh, you live in Sydney. Yeah, I'm not going to suggest walking up in the Blue Mountains. I find some of those hills incredibly steep. But you know where I'm getting to. I am now waffling. I'll leave you with one final thought. And you sound kind of, to a degree, a little bit conflicted in your question. Where should I walk from? And I've had a few issues and all the rest of it. Let me ask you one thing, Sarah. How much do you want this? How much do you want to walk another Camino? How much do you want to walk a longer one? And if you really want to do it, you will. It just takes a little bit of preparation. So it was a very long-winded way of answering your question. I hope I've helped answer your question. But thank you for asking it. And if anyone else out there has any particular sort of worries or concerns about a Camino, do send a question. Sarah sent one on Facebook. Jump onto Rob's Camino on Facebook, send a message there. It can put some of these videos in a much better context, I think, helping people with questions. And if you've still got questions, Sarah, we can catch up for a coffee, because I'm sure you're probably only down the road. But anyway, thanks for the question. Thanks for watching, everybody. Maybe you've got some suggestions for Sarah as well, and can share some advice. So see you next time. Bye for now.